I'm Helen Partlow with Waypoint Immigration USA, and we just released a brand new free NIW Success Guide. It's a step-by-step roadmap showing you how the NIW works, the evidence USCIS looks for, and the mistakes to avoid. Download your copy today and start building your future in the U.S. Hi, everybody. Happy Tuesday. I'm Helen Partlow, an attorney at Waypoint Immigration, and I'm here to talk to you about NIWs, which is what my main topic always seems to be. So I decided to do some things a little bit differently. I had been going live every Tuesday on various NIW topics for I don't know how long now. So I decided to switch it up a little bit and to tell everyone the topic ahead of time. So I'm going to be doing every other Tuesday. Today, I'm going to be talking about how to qualify. And then 2 weeks from now, I'll be talking about, I forget the topic now, but I posted the schedule. So for the end of the year, I have these 4 that are scheduled, different topics on NIW. So, if anyone particularly interests you more than the next, or you're able to attend one live and get your question in, that's all good as far as I'm concerned. If you wanted to post your comments, questions, or anything in the chat, I will be doing a Q&A at the end. But for now, I'm going to talk about how can one qualify for the NIW. So NIW, National Interest Waiver, is EB2, second preference category. So the NIW does not grant you any status. It does not give you any work authorization. It is a long-term planning device to get a green card. So a lot of our clients are already here on student visa or H-1Bs, but you don't have to be in America. You could be anywhere in the world and still qualify for a national interest waiver just by showing how your work can be impactful here in America. So with that in mind, there are several different ways to qualify. So when we're talking to a client or we're writing out an application or we're doing anything, there's a bunch of different steps. The first step is, okay, how can they qualify? Obviously, step 1. So the easiest way to qualify is by having a master's degree or higher. So you can have an advanced degree, and that's broken down into two avenues with that. One is master's degree or higher, or the other one is having a bachelor's degree plus 5 years of progressive experience. So if you've gotten your degree in America, you're good to go. But if you've got your degree outside of America, you will have to do an evaluation of your diploma to make sure it's equivalent to the same type in America. For instance, I know that there are some bachelor degree programs out there that are only 3 years, but the bachelor's programs here in America are 4 years. So, if you are using your bachelor's degree or anything like that, you'd have to do an evaluation. With that said, if you do have a master's degree and it is equivalent to one in America, or maybe you even have a PhD degree, you just simply have to present your diploma and transcripts and say, here you go. This is proof that I have completed this education, therefore I qualify under advanced degree. It's really simple. Not much can really be poked a hole in there. So that's always the best and easiest route if it's available. The second one is doing bachelor's plus 5 years of progressive experience. So same thing, you'd have to have a bachelor's in America or equivalent to one in America. And then that 5 years of progressive experience aspect, we have to prove through employment verification letters or some sort of like official HR kind of documents. And these letters need to state, obviously, what company you were at. It should be on company letterhead, signed by like an HR person or supervisor or something like that. And it needs to have the exact dates you were there, when you started, and if you're no longer there, when you ended. It needs to have your job title on there, and it also needs to have a couple of bullet points as to like your job duties, like what was your role in this position. And you have to do that for the last 5 years. So the part that we really need to zone in on, though, is not that it's simply saying you were employed for 5 years, but it's really that progressive experience angle. And that is where I see some people don't really explain that too in-depthly, and they just assume the officer is going to get it. Like, if you've been listening to me for a while, you know that we do not assume the officer gets anything. So, really kind of showing how, you start off as maybe a data analyst and now you're a senior data analyst. Don't assume that the officer is going to know, oh, well, of course that's progressive, just because common sense tells us that. Describe and use those letters as proof to say, I started off on this level, then I progressed and got, more experience. I got, better responsibilities or a team to manage or something like that. And you need to explain how you did not just stay the same level throughout that time. They want to see, have you actually progressed? Have you taken on additional responsibilities or, a higher level of project or something like that? So they really need to explain that part if you're talking about the bachelor plus the 5 years of progressive experience. So that one is not like, if you have a master's, obviously just go with that, because with the bachelor's, you are opening up for some commentary on, is this actually progressive? That sort of thing. If you describe it, it should probably be fine. But, it does then invite some opinion from the officer. And then the last one, which can be successful, of course, but it's where the officer can throw in the most, poke the bear, so to speak, like find any sort of an issue with, is the exceptional ability, where you have to meet 3 of at least, I think it's 10 criteria. Actually, no, I think it's 8. It's 8 criteria. And then you have to also meet a final merits determination. So not only do you have to meet the 3 criteria, but then you also have to show that you are, above your other peers. So through this, there's things like you can show your, educational degree. So say you did have a bachelor's, but it wasn't equivalent to an American bachelor, so it's 3 years. You can still use that for the exceptional ability to show that you have that education. So that's one criteria. Another one is if you have worked for 10 full-time years. They don't have to be consecutive. It just has to be 10 full-time years in your, field of the proposed endeavor. And, that would be done through like employment verification letters as well. Similar, talking about like an HR letterhead, your dates of employment, your job duties and things like that to prove that you have worked for those 10 years. And again, they don't have to be consecutive. They could be over 12, 15 years, have worked, just has to add up to 10 full-time. So if it's part-time, that doesn't count towards that criteria either. Another one is if you've had like a remuneration for your expertise, you've been paid and you has to be paid a little bit more than like the other person, have you been paid for your expertise? Kind of prove that through, an analysis and like pay stubs and things like that. Another one is if you have a license or certification that's required for your job. So, I'm not just talking about going on LinkedIn and getting some, certificate that you completed a course here, but I'm talking about like if you are a certified public accountant or something like that, where it's required for that job in order to do that job. Like as an attorney, I need to have a license. Therefore, you can't be an attorney without that license. So it's the same idea there. Let me think. Another one is that you have been like recognized by your peers. So this could be things like an award, or maybe you got published and therefore, you're recognized as an expert because your publication went through the peer review and, it met the qualifications. Maybe you have some reference letters to talk about, things like that. So you can clearly see that if you do go through exceptional ability, there is just more arguments, right? And anytime there are more arguments, there's more chance for the officer to find that kind of a hole and to kind of push back. I have seen RFEs for those in that type of category, where they met, the 3 different criteria, but they did not show like a final merit. So there is a final merits determination in this category as well if you are qualifying through this route. So you have to show, not only that you meet the 3 criteria, but you are kind of like a bit of above and beyond your peers and other people in your industry. So those are the different ways that you can qualify. And then once you qualify, then you have to prove your proposed endeavor, meets the different criteria like substantial merit, national importance, that you're well positioned to do your proposed endeavor, and that the balancing test, you're not going to harm the American workforce by getting your NIW. So that's still a whole nother separate argument that has to be made. Your proposed endeavor has to be explained. But, kind of coming down to those basics, you want to make sure how you qualify, and how you qualify is, the strongest argument that you can make, and trying to understand, you don't have to have a degree to qualify, but, what can you show instead of that? Or, if you are close to graduation, it might make sense to wait to get that degree because it is a little bit easier to show. Yeah, so with that said, I do see some questions coming in, so I'm going to go and take a look. Are there upcoming changes to qualification requirements for NIW in 2026? So that's a really great question, and the answer is we don't know. So, the Trump Gold Card is set to kind of keep picking up steam and to be implemented. And, it is anticipated that it could possibly be in the EB2 category. And therefore, what are they going to be doing with the NIW? There are going to be changes coming up. What those changes are, we don't know yet, unfortunately. So, I have been telling people that, it's probably better that, if you do qualify, to go in for it now while you know what that means for you and how it, applies to your life and your career and your ambitions and things like that. Just because we don't know yet, there's a lot more questions that we all have than answers at this point. Let's see. And NIW I-140 rejection rates are extremely high. Further to this, processing times are increasing manifold. So is it futile to file the NIW for the next 2 years? So it's funny that you actually mentioned that. I'm going to see if I can pull it up on my screen. I just looked at what USCIS shared again. They sent out not too long ago some sort of like documents. Right. Okay. So I see it here on my screen. The NIW approval rate as shown through USCIS for Q1 was 82.99%. Then it actually went up in Q2 to 84.36%. And now in Q3, the NIW approval rate is 78.63%. So yes, it has gone down, but it's still on average, well, from their numbers anyway, 78.63. And that is a bit delayed, right? So, they always tell us the numbers a bit after the fact. So while the numbers are certainly down from, 82.99 and 84, now down to 78, they're still getting approved. I think that definitely they are getting higher RFEs, and there is no way to break down this information, at least not from what I'm looking at. They might have it on there. There's a bunch of different tables. But from what I'm looking at, we don't know which ones were regular processing or premium processing, because if you think about it, if it's premium processing, there's a very good likelihood that they were applying under the last president, and now it's being adjudicated under the current president. So things might have shifted and changed. So kind of take that into account. But yeah, no, NIWs are definitely still getting approved, even though it feels like it's definitely gotten harder. And the numbers do reflect that they are down a little bit, but it's still, a higher number than maybe what was anticipated. And that was just recently updated too. I think when they first released it, I think it was mid-October, the numbers were definitely lower, but they have since now updated those numbers since they have now adjudicated some RFEs. So that number has definitely gone up now that they've kind of taken in those additional documents into account. How to know which center my I-140 petition under the new scopes classification for all centers. An I-140 is sent in based upon your address. So there's a website, on USCIS that you can find out where to submit your I-140. You look from what state you're living in, and it gives you an address if you're using FedEx or UPS or, depending upon how you're mailing it in. There it gets shifted around. I'm not exactly sure how they allocate their work, but they definitely do some sort of internal shift, and there is no way to really find out where it ends up. Does a license from another country need to be regulated in the US? So I think you're talking about exceptional ability and how we're talking about how licensing could be a qualification. Do you need this licensing to do the job itself? And if you're in the US without this license, I'm not really sure how that would translate. I think I would need to know more information here, because you'd have to have it, you would have to claim that you have to have the license in order to qualify, and you therefore have a license. So it sounds like you had a license, but have not gotten the American equivalent yet, maybe. If I plan to apply within a few months, would a premium application be recommended, given the fact that the current government shutdown and possible backlogs? Well, there's definitely backlogs. But the current government shutdown, USCIS is not impacted. It is funded by the fees. So every application that's submitted has fees, and that is how USCIS operates. But definitely we are recommending premium because there are those unknowns coming in 2026, and it is taking a year or even more now for regular processing. So you really kind of are rolling the dice that you're going to still qualify on the application as to which you're submitting it, without knowing what that change is going to look like. So you don't know if you're going to still qualify a year plus from now in the same way that you would then be, submitting your documents. So definitely would recommend doing premium with that. How many publications and citations are required? 0. There are no requirements for publications and citations. They're not a part of this application. I mean, a lot of people have them and can use that as how to tell their story of how they have been impactful. But the bottom line for an NIW is how can you be impactful to the United States? So publications and citations are one aspect that could be an avenue, but you could have impact through your job and impact through other things other than publications. So it's all about having some sort of documentation to help provide to the officer as to how you have been impactful and will continue to be impactful. So publications create that paper trail, if you will, but they are certainly not required. Are additional evidences, say evidences obtained after the initial submission, considered during RFE by USCIS? So that is a great question. So you have to have been able to be approved the day they receive your application. So RFEs are asking for more evidence, absolutely, but they have to be of activities that happened before the date that your application was received. So say, for instance, you send it in July 1st and you have a publication in September. You can't use that because you have to have been able to been, approvable in July when you first sent it in. But if you have more documents, or you can get another letter that's talking about something that you've done, or you've been able to obtain other documents like maybe a certificate of appreciation or some sort of additional citation, like the activity itself has to have been completed before the date that it was received. So that kind of shows, like, if you send it in afterward, that's really not something the officer is supposed to consider. And you don't want to distract them from, like sending in things that they're not supposed to be considering, and shying away from the things that they should be considering and that they do make your profile stronger. All right, so I'm actually not seeing any more questions at the moment. So with NIW, just wanted to kind of add into with this like line of questions that I'm seeing. Everything boils down to what kind of evidence you can provide, right? So if I'm going to tell the officer I'm going to help cure cancer, like everyone's going to say, oh, wow, that's, really important. A lot of people will benefit from that. Of course, that's impactful and things like that. But what do I have to prove it? Like you need to have that objective evidence. And that has been more and more and more clear as this year has gone on. You cannot just send in an application with just reference letters. I've talked to a lot of people and they're saying, oh, I can just get that in a reference letter. Like a reference, anyone could say anything, honestly. I mean, yes, they do matter and we definitely take them seriously and we definitely strategize them carefully and make sure that they meet all the different, bullet points that we want them to. But you can't just get approved on only reference letters. You need objective evidence. You need proof that you are doing the things that you're claiming to do. These letters need to be verifiable. All right, let me see. I think there's a couple more questions. What changes are coming in 2026? Would past NIW denial impact future petitions? So we're not sure what changes are coming, but with the gold card, we are expecting changes. I think I already described this earlier in today's live stream, but we are anticipating changes. What they are, we're not sure yet. So they would need to have to come out with something, and then they need to have a period of public commentary. So it wouldn't be something that would happen instantly, but beginning first half or so of 2026, definitely we'll be hearing more about that. And as far as a past NIW denial impacting future petitions, so, we definitely have done refiles for people that get, a RFE, an ultimate denial, and then they refile again. And we have had success with that. But I do think that if you have an NIW that was denied and you do a refile, you are probably more likely to get an RFE on that refile. But it doesn't have any real impact of you getting a green card at some point in the future. I think it just kind of probably triggers that RFE a little bit quicker than in some other scenarios. Could you please elaborate on what should be included in the file merit section to effectively demonstrate that you meet the above and beyond standard for exceptional ability? Yeah, so the argument, is definitely an argument that you have to make, and showing things like the prestige of what you have done. Maybe you have presented at prestigious conferences, or you have a really, critical kind of a role someplace. That's more EB1A. But, talking about what sets you apart from others, being recognized by others in the field is one of the criteria there. So maybe you do have a publication and it is at a really impressive journal, or maybe you have, you're paid a lot more than somebody else. Anything that could kind of show how you've gone above and beyond, some other peer, you're not just like the average person. So like I said, it definitely, emphasizing prestige of items that you've done, talking about, just like the overall argument as to how the evidence shows that you are exceptional. You're not just the average. So it's different from everybody, which is why I'm kind of, I guess, struggling here to tell you something more specific, because I'm not sure of, your particular background. But, that is some examples, where it was published, who you've had like a speaking engagement with. Maybe you got a certification that is really difficult and took a long time, and like all of these things kind of factor together. It's not about just one particular piece of evidence. It's about presenting what you have in your profile in the strongest way to show that you are like above and beyond the average kind of a person. This is a really helpful session. Thank you. What work qualifies for national interest? Does a tech role qualify for it? Well, first of all, thank you. I appreciate the kind words. But yeah, so we have a lot of tech people, honestly, as clients, software engineers, data analysts, data scientists, machine learning, artificial intelligence, all that sort of thing. So for instance, I'll give an example for the software engineer. There was a January 15th, 2025 USAS policy update, and they specifically gave this kind of an example for software engineers. They said, if a software engineer is simply taking something that already exists and just implementing it for their client or for their employer or something like that, that's not impactful. But if you have something that you are creating something new and that is something that is scalable or a certain framework that can be adopted by others and you're creating something new, that could be impactful. So when we're talking about NIW, we are really talking about how can you be impactful beyond just your company? What does that look like beyond that? Because I always tell people, I think of this as like the greedy American application, right? America wants to know what's in it for us. Of course, if you work for Walmart, Amazon, Google, or whoever, of course, you're going to be benefiting them. They're paying you and you are doing their work to, end of the day, give them more money. But, as America, like, what is it in it for us? That's great that you're benefiting your employer, but what's in it for us beyond just that? So for tech people, it really does go into, a lot of AI stuff, or, I've also seen things where making things have a framework or they're adoptable for others or people that are working with small to medium businesses and trying to help them kind of implement a lot of this tech that they don't normally have access to because they have a limited budget. Obviously, they're a smaller operation. They don't have the same resources as the really big companies. So there's definitely a lot of room for tech people. I would say the problem with those in the tech space is that they often have things that they cannot share as part of their application. So like I was saying, we really, really need objective evidence. We really need proof of what you have done, and it can be redacted. Like I don't really want straight code. Like I don't know what to do with that. The officer doesn't know what to do with that. But that's why doing things like speaking engagements or like a judging of a hackathon or like doing some sort of technical article or anything like that really does help create like that paper trail that we are looking for in this application. Can you use your master's thesis if you don't have a publication? So you don't need a publication again, and a master's thesis is not published. It's usually within like the confinements of your school. And even if it is published on your school, we need to show how are you impactful beyond your company? What are you doing that's helping more than your employer, more than your client? We need to show that impact. So master's thesis, like if you have one, you can maybe talk about your education and how that helps make you unique. And that could also help, with some of the arguments there in the third prong as to how are you unique and maybe not, why it's impractical for you to go through the perm process, but it's definitely not aligned with what I was saying. If one gets the 1-year AC-21 extension based on a pending NIW beyond initial 6 years, would that 7th year be portable? In that sense, is the at 7th year employer specific, or can it be recaptured, transferred? So I think what you're talking about here is if you're on H-1B, obviously you get the maximum of 6 years, but if you have a pending I-140 application before the start of your 6th year, you can get that 1-year extension. So, you can certainly change your H-1B at that point, but, I'm not sure how many people would want to hire you necessarily knowing that there is that 1 year left. That's kind of like another side problem for sure. But as far as like immigration goes, if you're on H-1B and, you can certainly transfer from one person to the next. And as far as NIW goes, as long as you are pursuing your proposed endeavor, as you describe it in your application, that is what matters the most. But I am now late and I do have some calls I need to get to. So if anyone does want to, talk to us, we would be more than happy to look at your profile and help answer any of your questions. You go to waypointimmigration.org. We have an EB2 NIW category. We also do EB1A and any sort of layoffs or marriages and career planning, et cetera, et cetera. So we're more than happy to help talk to you through a consultation. And otherwise, I hope everyone has a good 2 weeks and I will see you there.